Happening now. We want to welcome our viewers from across the United States and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room. Good morning, good day, good evening. This is EdTech Situation Room episode number 163 for January 29th, 2020. My name is Jason Neiffer, and I am the Assistant Director and Curriculum Director of the Montana Digital Academy, the state virtual school located on the University of Montana campus in fabulous Missoula, Montana. And joining me tonight, as always, good evening, Dr. Fryer. How are you this evening, sir?
Good evening, Jason. I am well and glad to be back. After a week's hiatus and travels, I am the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at the Cassidy School here in Oklahoma City. And yes, it's amazing to me still. Just like open the laptop and 5 minutes later, thanks to StreamYard, here we are online. So we have a number of links tonight that we're going to discuss. First, you've got to give us a little weather update, though. Cold in Missoula, perhaps?
Bizarre, actually. There was one forecast, it's wavered a bit, that suggested we'd hit 60 on Saturday. And that's just plain weird. So tonight, I think we probably just hit freezing. It was in the lower 40s today. Very pleasant if you're not afraid that the state will light on fire later this year if we don't get enough moisture. But yeah, it feels like that there are some dramatic weather shifts, and that western Montana is looking more like northern Idaho or eastern Washington in regards to summer weather. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, we're mild. We had a lot of rain, a ton of rain yesterday, and the band of snow was just north and west of us. So we just saw rain. You got down to maybe mid 30s, but it would have been a ton of snow if we had colder temperatures. But, back up warmer today, and we are, I don't know. I've got my Ed Camp Tulsa shirt on tonight, and we've got our Ed Camp OKC. I think it's like maybe the 8th or 9th. And so it's the last weekend in February. So inevitably, if we have an ice storm, that will probably be the weekend. But we will, we'll see. So I guess, enjoy what you can. But we were able to have a bit of fire when we had like literally 30 minutes of snow flurries, a couple weeks ago. So mild here. But my parents have gotten a ton of snow in Kansas, not that far away. So it just depends on where you are. And I've also found people are always like, the weather here is so changeable. I think that's true just about anywhere. I've never.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some places it's always Houston. Yeah, Houston kind of has the same weather, but.
Right. Montana, the phrase here is that if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. And
that's
yeah, I think that might be a universal phenomenon.
Right. All right. Well, hey, we've gotten our weather out of the way. What are we really here to talk about tonight?
Well, the EdTech Situation is a podcast where we take a look at the headlines from across the techosphere, and we try to shoot them through the educational prism. In other words, taking what's going on in the broader tech industry and discussing whether or not it has implications in K-12 classrooms and what those implications might be. Our links are always available at our website, www.edtechsr.com, where you can find both show notes, so the specific links we talked about, and also you can go to our massive link dump document, which has thousands and thousands of links going back to the very first episode so long ago, including a lot of stuff we don't talk about. And if you're just curious, the things that crossed our mind this week that we may or may not have talked about in the show itself, that's a great list of kind of reading fodder for you. So Wes, you took the lead this week on links. Thank you so much for that. Can you give me a sense of where you'd like to start?
Yes, I want to start with security. So, this has been a normal title for us. In fact, we'll preview for you. If you're not looking at the doc, we kind of give some, topic titles for our different sections. So this week, Alex, we have Google, Chrome OS, Microsoft, AI, security, YouTube, Apple, privacy hardware, and miscellaneous. So I will take security for 500. This was kind of an amazing article. This is from Vice magazine on January 27th. It says, leaked documents expose the secretive market for your web browsing data. And this article is a bit of a warning to everyone for the software that you might install on your computer or your smartphone, kind of what you sign up for. And so Avast, A-V-A-S-T, is an antivirus company. And, I am thankful to mostly be an Apple using Computer Guy and also Chrome. And, my use of Windows has been limited. As a technology director, I was definitely in the Windows world, far more than I don't know. I was a computer lab teacher way back in the day, in the late 90s. But anyway, different software programs go in and out of vogue. And I'll do a shout out to my friend Miguel Gulen, who is always a great source of, and has been, free software, good tools to use. And one of the things that you've just had to do, especially with Windows systems, has been run antivirus software. Well, it turns out that Avast was selling the data that it was collecting for people. And in some cases, it was selling exact click feed. So it says the documents from a subsidiary of Avast shine light on a secretive sale and supply chain of people's internet browsing histories. They show that the Avast antivirus program installed on a person's computer collected data, and then the company was called JumpShot. It actually still is, that repackages it in different products sold to companies like Google, Yelp, Microsoft, McKinsey, Pepsi, Home Depot, Condé Nast. And it says some clients paid millions of dollars for products that include a so-called all clicks feed, which can track user behavior, clicks, and movement across websites in highly precise detail. So I think this is interesting in several respects, but one is certainly privacy, because we have a number of people saying, privacy is dead. Hey, I don't really care. I have nothing to hide. But really, every single thing that you would search for, that you would ever put in your computer, no problem having a company, own that. So we've said this before on the show. A lot of times, if there is no quote unquote price for the product you're using, then you may be the product. We live in this surveillance capitalism world where Facebook as well as Google and other companies are selling our data for the opportunity that we have, which I think is great in many cases to use their products. But this was a case too where folks were not being notified in advance, and so I think this also speaks to the important role of consumer protection. Think Ralph Nader, think the ways in which we don't want, things to be, labeled in a way that would be misleading. We certainly don't want harmful products to be sold. And, people need to know, hey, if I'm getting this free antivirus software, but, you're recording every click that I take on my computer and then selling it to somebody, that's information that we need to have. So, Jason, have you been an Avast computer antivirus software user? And then, what are your thoughts? Does this come as a surprise, or are you kind of thinking this is just maybe normal for the world of free software companies?
Well, I have been an Avast user in the past, and it used to be my preferred free antivirus product because it was simple to install. It seemed to be effective. I've had instances where I've downloaded malware, or I've installed a program from kind of free internet world, and I got scammed to go to a link that had a malware payload into it, and this is on Windows platforms, and Avast seemed to work fine. But I guess I was both not surprised by this, and also a little terrified, because I think you mentioned this notion that free products aren't free, that there's something in the trade there that makes it a commercially viable business to be able to offer a free effective software suite. But I guess the bottom line for me is that we just have to be careful. And I think part of the problem that we're running into in 2020 is that we've had 20 years of free internet services to this point, right? You pay your $9.99 a month AOL, or your $99.99 DSL line, or fiber line to get super fast internet, and from there everything, or much of the internet, is quote unquote free. But something I've become very acutely aware of is that as a personal internet user, I should be paying for services that I value, right? And as an example of that, I know for a fact that Google, the free service they give off, there's some advertising trade-off for that, but I also give them money, and I buy personal Google services as part of Google for Small Business that I utilize to utilize most of their apps. I don't use a lot of the free stuff either in exchange for, because I just don't want advertising targeted towards me. And it's a phenomenon we have to be aware of, right? But it goes back to our mantra all the time that this is a digital citizenship question, and understanding how the internet is funded, understanding that the free nature of the internet is really not as free as it comes off. And also to schools, if you value something and you don't want the data trade, the answer isn't to ignore the data issue or privacy issues. It's certainly not to stop using the internet. It's to figure out ways to fund meaningful tools and services that you can use to help your students. Don't get me wrong. I use plenty of free services. Right now, my favorite free service is Wakelet. Wakelet's a great playlist maker, and I'm starting to create a Wakelet that goes with all my presentations. So instead of putting links on slides to articles, and I sometimes joke that when I do conference presentations, I'm actually going to be assigning homework at the end of the presentation, because I do ask my listeners and viewers to go and read some additional articles if they're interested in the topic. But Wakelet's a great tool for that. I don't know how Wakelet makes money, but I owe myself an explanation if that's the case. And if they get to a point where they have a non-free tier, I'm using the tool enough that I should pay for it. So I think that's an incredibly important part of this discussion.
Yep, most definitely. All right, where to next?
Well, let's talk Chromebooks for a couple of moments. Last week was the BETT conference in London, and I know a lot of EdTech folks were from this side of the pond were at that conference, but there were two announcements related to Chromebooks that I think are worthy of thought and discussion, because they will have an impact on schools. The first one is that Google has announced that starting with all new Chromebooks in 2020, Chromebooks will now have an 8-year support life. In other words, from the day they are released, Google will release updates for that Chromebook for 8 calendar years before they shut off the updates. And this is something we've talked about probably half dozen times in the past. Chromebooks come with expiration dates, right? They are not forever technology products. And while I like the simplicity of Chromebooks, and I like to buy more premium Chromebooks, I've run into this issue. I had an original Chromebook Pixel 13, which is, 2013 edition, which was one of the first high-end Chromebooks. It's a beautiful Google-built device with a touchscreen and a high-resolution display. That stopped receiving updates I think it was late 2018 or early 2019. The Chromebook Pixel 2015 ends updates in 2021, 6 years after. And although they've been incrementally increasing the amount of time, it was 5 years, then 6.5 years, and then some were extended out to 7, and now all of them are 8. 8 years is a reasonable bargain, I think, when it comes to updates. And even the most money savvy of schools, let's put it that way, would find 8 years of a technology product to be, I would think, a relatively meaningful life. I do want to say, however, and I'm working a blog post here, and I don't know if it's going to ever be a well thought through argument enough to post. That's all well and good, but I do think there is a natural end to the Chromebook's life if you are buying lower grade hardware. And something that I have learned personally, and as I've mentioned in the past, I am a full-time Chromebook user. I use a Chromebook as my mobile platform. I use a Chromebox at work. I generally use a cloud-ready box at home, which is...
You are the chromiest person I know, Jason.
Yeah, I'm pretty
that very strong compliment.
Yeah, that I am very chromy, as a matter of fact. But one thing I've learned over time, and I first bought an early Samsung Chromebook that was kind of meh, and then I did buy a Chromebook in 2014 after my beloved MacBook Air 11 died in a battle with a cup of coffee. And that, by the way, that Chromebook is now not being updated either. I went and checked the other day, but the ones with low-powered ARM processors, 2 gigabytes of RAM. I would even argue 4 gigabytes of RAM is starting to become tested by power users. That is not a good experience. It's not a good experience with a new Chromebook. It's not a good experience with an old Chromebook. And I don't want schools to be lured into the notion that if you spend, $120 a Chromebook in 2020, that your students are going to be good to go until 2028, because I just don't think that that's very realistic. And that, if you are investing in an i3 chip or an i5 chip or the M3 chip, and then some of the ARM processors, higher-end ARM processors, are starting to become sufficiently speedy. But I do think you need to think about the end user in mind if you are purchasing for the long haul. None of my current Chromebooks will go to 2028. I've not purchased a new one in 2020. I'm unlikely to do so, I think. But I do think it's something I'm going to experiment a little more with. And I think I do owe it to those that I advocate to, that I need to probably grab a typical school Chromebook and see if I can get away with that as a power user, because I think that's part of that discussion. So, Wes, you have wore an IT hat before. Does an 8-year lifespan for updates change the calculus for you as an IT director when it comes to adopting Chromebooks?
It's hugely important. The reason I was unable to and we both had some travel and different conflicts last week. I was with a team of 8 other educators from our school, visiting 4 other schools in the Dallas area as we contemplate our options for one-to-one laptops in our middle school. Not for next year. We're looking probably a year and a half. We visited a Chromebook school. We visited a Microsoft Windows Surface Book, Surface Book 2, Surface Book Pro 2, whatever. Latest top-end Microsoft tablet, and then a Mac using school. Primarily saw MacBooks. There are some iPads there, and then we also went to a BYOD school. And so, looking at warranties and refresh and how long are you going to have these devices, it's hugely important. It's really amazing, and I think I'm definitely going to be writing some blog posts about this, and I might even try to get something else published. Because one of these schools, Ursuline Academy, which was founded in the I think 1870s, has been one-to-one since 1996. Melinda Gates is a graduate of their school, and they were with Toshiba, I think, for like 18 years, and they switched to Microsoft 3 years ago. But there is just such different cultures and stories that people have. And one of the things that I walked away with, we've been using a lot of Chrome at our school. We have 7 different Chromebook carts in our middle school, and we have somewhere around 270 or so students in 5th through 8th grade. The easiest decision for us would be to go with Chrome because it's being utilized so much. We've been at Google School for over 10 years, and for Google to extend support in that way, put that together with a third-party company that's going to warranty for accidental, water damage, theft, other kinds of things. It's huge. So we are looking at Chromebooks that are coming off of warranty or going out of warranty, I should say, this summer, the refresh cycle. It's really important. So I don't think that an extended warranty like that by itself, is going to be the selling point, but it's certainly important. And it's also important in this whole context to think about how Chrome is an operating system that was built from the ground up by Google to be much better than the legacy OSs like Windows OS and even Mac OS that's built on Linux, and to make it so that it can be truly a cloud managed and much more secure environment. We have our admin console in Google set to just randomly update at different times, overload your internet pipe with updates. So, all of our devices just on their own stay up to date, and we're able to do that kind of thing. We can and do manage things in other ways with other kinds of tools, but having used a lot of said tools, Chrome is phenomenally easy. So I'm very glad to see Google moving in that direction. What I do think, and this is, I'm gonna have to go down this rabbit hole a lot, but I want to know, and this is a shout out to anybody who is doing the most with Chrome tablet technology as far as styluses and writing. The Microsoft school, like I said, it was really impressive. I saw a lesson as a calculus AB class being taught, and they were doing derivatives together using OneNote. It was super impressive, the ease with which they were able to share each other's screens and being able to make their work transparent to each other. It was like, wow, it wasn't impressive on a media production or something, or alternative assignment sort of way, but just in the way that the thinking and the work of the students and teacher were readily visible to each other, and the way that we could just write. And that's one of the things that I really find myself wanting, both personally and then also for students, is like the whole 360. I want to be able to type. I want to be able to speak to text. I want to be able to draw and annotate. And so if you or anybody, Jason, knows of some schools that are just really doing phenomenal stuff with like the Lenovo, we have 300Es, the 500E might be the newer brand. It's like a yoga style where you can rotate it right on over, and you've got the touch interface. Anyway, I want to see Google push that and get even better with that with hardware.
Yep, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. And then just a quick related article. Google's also announced that they are going to increase the price of a device's management software. And so for those of you that are aware of Chrome management, you buy a Chromebook, and then if you want to manage the Chromebook using a Google Apps, or Google Suite domain, you have to spend, it used to be $30 and now it's $38. And part of what Google is saying is that now that, these devices are, when bought new, can last up to 8 years, that there's more value there, and that they'd be providing more services for a longer amount of time. And so they want to increase the price of that, which I find to be personally quite reasonable. I think in light of how easy it is to maintain Chrome devices on the management side of this, I think $38 per device, which, by the way, you should absolutely make sure that that's worked into the price if you're working with an educational vendor. Don't buy those separately unless you're getting some kind of crazy deal on the Chrome devices. Instead, just buy those along with the Chrome devices. And then if Mike Castanelli, my partner in crime in the Digital Academy, were here, he would tell you should also work in what's referred to as white glove service, which is they basically set them up on your domain. So all you have to do is open them up and sign into them. But that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. When I came to Cassie School in July of 2015, we were not paying any kind of license fee for any of the Chromebooks that we had, any of the devices, actually. And that was a very important transition that we made. So we had to aftermarket purchase those for existing Chromebooks. And then as we purchase new ones, it's really silly if you are a school or any other kind of enterprise to not manage your devices with mobile management. And Chrome's management console is really unparalleled. I mean, I've used 3 different what are called mobile device management, or MDM platforms, to manage iPads, and functions are similar, but Chrome is fantastic. I'd like to pick up a Chrome article as well, and this is actually, I guess, this is more of an Android one, but this is from Ars Technica on January 27th. Google's upcoming AirDrop clone gets an early demo on video. This is fantastic. I don't know how many of our listeners are, familiar with AirDrop on iOS, but it is really a super, quote unquote, magical technology that's phenomenal. We were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming a few summers ago on a raft trip. And, one of the things not everybody realizes is to send a media like photos or video from one phone to another, or actually any iOS device to any macOS device, you do not have to be in a Wi-Fi area. You do not have to be on the same Wi-Fi network. And this is what Google is developing too. So it initially makes a Bluetooth connection, close proximity, and then once they're connected, it uses Wi-Fi for the quote the heavy lifting of sending the files. And so anyway, we had been on a raft trip with this other family on the Snake River, and we both had taken pictures of each other, and so we're just in the van or whatever, driving back to the hotel, and then we're airdropping back and forth. It was a very geeky moment. But I have wanted to have this on Android. This has probably been, it's more than 5 years ago when I was doing instructional coaching in Yukon. working on like a paper slide video project where kids use their own devices and they take their pictures. How do you transfer those if you've got photos on multiple devices and you need to bring them together? And so we had found some different apps, never found anything great. And so the article says they are building this into Google's Play services, and that's good news from a compatibility standpoint because basically every Android device has Google Play. And so, there'll probably be a point at which if you have a super duper old Android, it's not going to work. But this is a way to send files back and forth over Wi-Fi, even when you don't have an internet connection. I think that's really good news for Android users. So I know, Jason, you have been an Android user at times. Is this good news?
It is good news. The only unfortunate piece about this is that I think I am the only Android user in a sea of iOS users. So I think at work now, 2 people join me on Android, and the balance of folks at work iOS, and then my entire family is iOS except for my dad, who's got an Android phone. And I see Dr. Fryer's pointing to his Apple Watch, and to be clear, I do have a Geek of the Week I'll share later that I think I found my alternative to, or at least an interesting nerdy alternative to the Android Wear devices, which have not been super satisfying for me. I did buy a newer one over Christmas that I enjoy. And there's supposed to be better ones out in 2020, according to news out of the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas. But yeah, definitely that's the case. I think it's a great technology, but it is definitely not what I would refer to as a game changer for me to move back over to the Apple universe.
Oh yeah, but it's good to see that. And it's also one of these cases where I think we're seeing sort of the floor raised in terms of function. One of the big things we need to see, and of course, it'd be great for that to be cross-platform. Apple enjoys having, and can make some certain technologies like AirPlay as well as AirDrop. It's a proprietary thing, but I want to see enterprise wireless, streaming, enterprise manageable Chromecast streaming for Chrome devices. And anyway, I don't think we quite have that yet. At least we haven't been able to find that. So anyway, maybe that will come as well. Where should we go to next?
Well, let me tell an interesting story that happened. It's been happening over the last couple of weeks, and I think it's interesting because going back to our earlier discussion about the length of time that Chromebooks were available to use when you purchased them new. Sonos is the maker of high-end audio equipment, and I have never personally been a Sonos user, but the people that I know that are Sonos users are incredibly dedicated Sonos users. They have a proprietary technology that allows you to plug in speakers around your house, and you can do things like instantly sync them. They're very high-quality speakers, and for audiophiles, it is a go-to set of devices. And Sonos announced several weeks back that they were going to offer users of older Sonos devices the opportunity to upgrade to a new device in a kind of an interesting way. You could take your Sonos device that's no longer supported, you could put it into some kind of special mode, like retirement mode. I can't remember what the name of it was, but essentially it renders the hardware worthless because it no longer works. The software shuts itself down. Recycling mode, I'm sorry, is the name of the mode. And then after you put it into recycling mode, you send it to a hardware recycler, and then you can get $30 or 30% off new Sonos equipment. And the problem, of course, is that Sonos is incredibly expensive equipment. And a lot of the Sonos users that were being left out in the cold were, I think, understandably crisp about the fact that they were going to lose their hardware, right? It was going to be put in this retirement mode, and yet it was still very functional. And the CEO of Sonos finally said last week, and the article I'm pointing to is from The Verge on January 23rd. CEO says, basically, we screwed up. We shouldn't be doing this. We should support it for as long as it's practically able to support. And basically, Sonos is now going to support, instead of this recycling mode, they're going to support this hardware as long as it's practically possible to do so. May not get all new features, which is not that uncommon if you use, for example, Apple products. Those are updated for usually a long time, but new features start to disappear. I think that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. The reason why I thought about this in context of education is that the education market's so interesting in comparison to certainly power users and passionate users of electronics in the personal world, but also in a lot of cases, businesses as well, because the longer the lifespan of tech, the more likely it is to be attractive, I think, to school buyers. And Sonos is not technology that I would imagine is being adopted commonly or if at all in schools, but this notion that, hardware manufacturers are trying to get you to upgrade, maybe for new features, maybe to get more money out of you by purposely disabling equipment, that seems, pretty challenging to me.
Absolutely. Well, hey, let's put on our tinfoil hats, shall we? And jump down a rabbit hole. This will link to my Geek of the Week, but I put this also under the security headline. And this is from the Washington Post, pardon me, on January 22nd. The headline is, UN report, Saudi Crown Prince was involved in alleged hacking of Bezos' phone. And of course, Bezos is referring to Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon. And I think possibly like the wealthiest person in the world. I think that title changes, but I think he may have that now. And you may remember, and maybe like a lot of other people, pardon me, when I heard this, I kind of was like, that's kind of bizarro. Is this headline like, some weird conspiracy theory? Could this really happen? Bezos was accusing, and his team was accusing Saudi Arabia of actually hacking his phone. And you may think, well, why the heck would Saudi Arabia want to do that? Well, Bezos owns major media company. Like, doesn't he own the Washington Post? Is that the one that, yeah. And, so he's a very powerful and influential guy. Well, the headline, okay, so there's different layers of this. The headline is misleading. It says UN report. Well, it was not a UN directed security group that did this. There was a third party group, which I think was actually employed by Bezos or Amazon to investigate this. And they released a report that said high probability. And so this is an actual direct text message on WhatsApp. So at some point, the Saudi Crown Prince, the Crown Prince, who goes by the name of MBS. And by the way, right, we've talked about Jamal Khashoggi, and one of the things which there's a lot of consensus around is that the Saudi Crown Prince, ordered the dismemberment of this, journalist who was a United States citizen in the embassy of Turkey, about a year ago. So at some point, MBS has met Jeff Bezos. They've exchanged WhatsApp, numbers, so they have direct access to each other. And so evidently he sent him a link, which he clicked on, that compromised his phone, and then made a deluge of data, personal photos and all kinds of things, upload to a server, which the Saudis were then able to have and use and release. And we'll probably talk a little bit about some election stuff. Peggy George, who is in our chat room and watching tonight, we appreciate, has forwarded us some really good links for students to use and teachers related to the election. But when it comes to election hacking and this kind of thing, from a media literacy standpoint, like, this headline's misleading because the UN report, it was not created by the United Nations that reached this conclusion. So media literacy, be careful of your headlines and everything else. I've put a link, and I'll put this in the show notes as well, to a lesson I've used the last 2 trimesters. It's probably one of my favorite lessons, and I'll share it at ISTE. I'm going to get to do an ISTE session about media literacy for middle school, and I call it Don't Get Tricked Online. But, one of the videos that I have in here, it's so crazy to even think this is real. But there's this service that you can start off spending as little as like $30 or something called the Spinner, where when you get somebody to click a link, it sets a cookie that basically launches a campaign that they're going to subconsciously get in their social media feed articles of whatever you want, whether it's settle out of court or, propose marriage to me or stop riding motorcycles. They use as an example. It's kind of weird. One click, ladies and gentlemen, that is one of the takeaways here, is that you and I, who are probably not going to be the target of what's called a spear phishing attack. And that's when a group or individual is specifically targeting us, to, take us down and get access to our data. So, Jason and I are appreciative of all of you that are listening, but, just full disclosure, we're not going to I don't think be the targets of any kind of attacks like this, but who knows? What is important to know is that you can compromise your device with a single click. And even though Apple people, and I put myself in this camp, have really probably been a little bit too, self-assured when it comes to security, thinking that, hey, we're using Mac stuff, iOS, we're immune. That is not the case. So definitely a bit of a rabbit hole there in terms of, is this conspiracy theory? Is this real headline? But evidently this sounds, like it's legit, and it points to how easily our devices can be compromised. So I think, and I don't know, Jason, if we've seen security groups recommending this, I think that we should have, probably as families, an annual hygienic cleansing where we erase all the content on our devices like once a year, kind of like maybe over the summer, and you just reinstall. You have stuff backed up, and that's really, and even if you could still have some malware, that's part of your backup. So even when you restore, something could be persistent. But thoughts about this? Are you surprised that Saudi Arabia would go to such lengths to acquire personal data of the Amazon CEO?
I'm not surprised by that, in part because I know that a lot of the intelligence work that has happened in the world in the last 15 years has been based on internet technologies, and often have taken advantage of the fact that a lot of people just don't understand what good security looks like, personal security looks like. And additionally, I guess I wouldn't have been cautious about clicking on a video of someone who I had added to a chat service, right? That's just not something that I would be suspicious of. So, in some cases, you can prepare for that.
Yeah, because it wasn't like a spam message. This is coming directly from somebody you've exchanged your number with.
Yeah, and I obviously I do not work in the world of international intrigue, so I can't imagine, like as you mentioned, Wes, that we ourselves will be targets for this. But it doesn't make it any less concerning. And we got to figure out the ways to securely connect with one another, because the privacy thing is critical.
And I will say this, on an internet safety, digital citizenship, parent university education basis, looking a little bit into parental controls and software, there are a large number of software programs out there today masquerading themselves as parents monitor your teens, but they absolutely can be used to track and stalk people, even when you think about dating. So, two of our kids now are in college, and Tinder is a thing, right? And so the ways in which you meet people and exchange information, one of the things that folks can do in sending you a link is not just, subconsciously send things into your social media feeds, but, they can compromise your device to activate it, to activate your microphone, to activate your camera, to not have the little light come on when you're like, right now, my FaceTime camera light is on and I know it's active, but there's ways these things could be activated, surreptitiously. And so, we say this a lot, be careful out there, kids, it's dangerous. But part of the role, in fact, I'm now a finalist for a TEDx event. It'll be in September, but I have to do a practice speech by like February 21st. And my topic is technology fear therapy. And I think it is a challenge to try and help people be aware of these issues and not frozen by fear, and focus on some really practical things that we need to do. So certainly one of the things we need to do is be aware of the threats, be aware of the dangers. And one of the challenges with technology is many of these are invisible to us, right? Unlike getting in your car when you see other vehicles and pedestrians and animals or whatever you're going to, possibly, have an interaction with out there. You can see that stuff. With technology, there's a lot of things that are hidden. So I think that's one of the important roles we have, not only, with students and other, teachers and colleagues, but with our family members. And Jason's talked multiple times. He is the Neiffer family IT guy. So, somebody needs to step up to some of these kinds of things, and realizing the danger that is present in clicking a link. And also, I think the importance of periodically, wiping your device so you can try to ensure that you're not using a compromised device. All those are important things. Maybe, Jason, and this would be your next Kickstarter idea, we need to have a little alert on the Wi-Fi to be able to, let us know when there's a ton of data that's unusual and weird being sent, up the chain, so to speak, or uploaded, because that evidently is what happened to Bezos. Is as soon as this was compromised, there was tons of data that was being uploaded. And so on a school firewall or a school system, you might have an intrusion protection system, which is going to be monitoring that kind of stuff, right? So if a computer starts, uploading a lot of data to some weird IP address, network administrators and people like that will become aware of it. So maybe that will be, generation 2030 of the Google Wi-Fi. And that'll be one of the features, kind of like having a smoke alarm in your house to say, whoa, hey, did you know that, Wes's iPhone has just started to upload, gigabytes of data to some, weird website in the middle of the night. I don't think anybody has that functionality built in today, but I bet there's somebody listening to this who's used a Raspberry Pi and can probably code that by hand. So if you do, let us know and we'll be sure to put it into our show notes.
Yep, absolutely. So,
all right, what else?
So let me take us into kind of another direction here. An article from the Register on January 24th notes that Apple is telling the EU that it will not adopt a common charger and a charger standard. And this has been a long-going debate between Apple and the EU. The EU really wants everyone to use the same kind of technology to charge your mobile phones, and their concern is e-waste, right? That you update from one phone to the other, and if everything had the same charging technology, then you could go buy one charger once and then use it across all of your phones and call it good. And of course, 5 years ago, that standard was micro USB. That was the preferred standard by the EU because it was in the predominance of phones, specifically Windows phones and Android phones. And now that's USB-C. And although the good folks at Apple have adopted USB-C in some way, shape, or form, it's what powers their MacBooks now. It what powers some of their iPads, for example. It appears that Apple will not give up the so-called Lightning connector, which is their proprietary technology for doing that. And I have to say, and by the way, there's a lot of articles back and forth on this, people talking about the extraordinary number of old cables they have in their homes and boxes of electronic cables that people couldn't feel they could take to the recycler or perhaps throw away into the trash. And I have to say, I think this is a bad idea on Apple's part. I think if we could all be on the same charging standard, it just makes the world better. And something that's happened to me since I kind of moved over to USB-C, and I would say it's probably been about 18 months since I got to a point that everything, with the exception of my chargeable headphones, which are still on micro USB, that everything is USB-C. And it's not as easy as that, unfortunately. There are different levels of chargers, different speeds of chargers. There is some incompatibility still in the USB-C standard, but the fact that I can go to a conference, for example, and next week I start about 6 weeks of travel, various work and personal travel for 6 or so weeks, and I have a travel bag that I take with me, and the fact that I can take 2 pretty quality chargers and cover my laptop and my phone and my tablet is pretty great. And so, Wes, I know you're in an Apple household and you are an Apple Pro user yourself. Does abandoning these standards make sense for an Apple user too, or is that just my bias as an Android fanboy?
Well, I mean, right now I'm using USB-C completely for my connections here. In fact, I had to switch because I hadn't charged my iPad, and so my MacBook Pro, is running on USB-C connection, and I just unplugged it and I plugged my iPad in because I've got one of the newer iPads, which is, anyway, maybe, I don't know, it was maybe a test or something like that. I agree with you that I think charging standards, unfortunately, companies I think have seen, and Apple's in this boat, new device, got to have a new attachment, got to have a new adapter, whether that's for power or anything, is a opportunity for income. So yes, that would be a good thing to see. And I don't know if that's something that a consumer group could really push for or not. But I would certainly like to see more of that. So anyway, I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I do know that we're still in a boat where even today somebody was talking, they saw my laptop like, oh, look, that's new. And I said, yeah, but remember, I can't put a USB, USB flash drive in here. I have to have an adapter, even to plug into a projector if I'm not airplaying or something like that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
we're going to continue for the foreseeable future to be in this sort of, adapter Hades of, having to pay careful attention, depending on our device that we've got, that we bring whatever we're going to need to connect to, VGA, HDMI, power, or whatever. For us as a school, that was a big reason for us to stay with the MacBook Air laptop that had USB-A connectors, because that's how, the smart boards that we still have connect. That's how, teachers that have USB flash drives, connect, and it's just a whole separate thing to track with IT and keep it, spares of and things like that if you're going to need to have all of those separate adapters. So it's still a mess, and I don't think it's going to improve really quickly.
Okay, great. Where to next?
Hey, let's go down to privacy, and I want to talk about a Wired article from January 21st that said, could this plan make Facebook obsolete? We've talked about privacy quite a bit on the show before, and this article talks about Kalia Young, who has a plan to try and make our digital identities something that we actually can manage and can take from place to place. So just like the internet's built on standards like TCP/IP for data and SMTP for email, she is wanting to have standards developed and then adopted by consortiums and internet task forces that would legitimize them and possibly even enforce them. And so she wants a decentralized system where it's not something that Apple controls or Amazon or Google, and it basically puts us in control as consumers. And so her initiative is called SSI. And it's a project that I think I don't know the things that monetize and that bring money are certainly going to be the ones that are pushed, I guess, by the tech companies. And so I don't know that there is a financial incentive at this point for companies to adopt something like this. But I would certainly love it if, just like running our credit report, we can find out what credit agencies know about us, what kinds of things have been filed. It's an opaque cloud today. What data do companies have about me? What do they think, I like? What kinds of things have they recorded? I do not have visibility into that cloud unless, we talked about Manoush Samarodi and the Note to Self podcast. They referenced some really amazing privacy projects where, like, there was a Firefox extension, I think, that someone had created that, took a look at your Facebook profile and said, this is what Facebook thinks they know about you, etc. But I think this is these kinds of initiatives. She has something called, I guess it was back in 2005. She founded the Internet Identity Workshop with Phil Windley and Doc Sorrells, and then they get together for conferences, and they're trying to work on this SSI. SSI stands for Self-Sovereign Identity, a technology that uses decentralized identifiers that people create and own, and verifiable credentials issued to them and under their control. So reminds me a little bit of not early, but just PGP. Did you ever play with Pretty Good Privacy? So you'd register on a site, and you would create keys, and there'd be a private key and a public key. And again, like my friend Miguel Gulen and I, it's like about the only time I've exchanged things back and forth. I'd write a little secret message, and then you'd have the other person's public key, and then they could decrypt it and read it. But anyway, it reminds a little bit about that. So thoughts about this, Jason? And is this something we should be waving the flag for in school, or maybe as consumers, as citizens? Are you forming an interest group there in Montana to petition the government and lead us in a new direction when it comes to privacy and identity management?
Well, I think that the of all the many interesting things you said there, I think the one that is the most interesting to me is that I do think that maybe we are owed privacy reports that says who has our data and what they're using it for, much like a credit report. That's an incredibly interesting notion to me. And in fact, because the credit report has such an impact on us financially, that's one of the reasons why we have access to that information. And I think we're getting to a point that our personal data does have that value to it, right? That there are cases where personal information on the internet can increase or lower prices depending on what other websites that you visit. The websites that utilize kind of personalized pricing can sometimes create weird situations where if you are constantly going to luxury websites, you may be charged a higher price than if you are going to more bargain-based websites and that sort of thing. And if it's going to impact us in that way, I think we're owed a more transparent way of getting that data. And I didn't put the article in this week, and I intend to, but I want to find out more about it so I can speak from authority. Chrome has announced that in 2022 they're going to get rid of tracking cookies as a means of allowing for tracking on the internet. And I'm trying to understand exactly what that means because, to be clear, I'm not sure if experts in privacy understand 100% of what that means yet.
It's third-party tracking tools. So my understanding of that is, and I think we had a link into it 2 weeks ago, they're going to still have Google tracking, but they're not going to be allowing these third-party trackers within 3 years. So that
Right.
we were talking about browsers. In fact, you might want to do that article I saw that you about, I'm feeling guilty using the Edge on Mac or whatever.
Right.
We're talking about browsers because that's a reason that Edge and Safari and Firefox, may be preferable to folks, is because they can block those third-party trackers today, where Chrome is saying, officially they're going to wait a few years. You want to talk about that Edge article?
Yeah, so we had mentioned on the last episode that Microsoft Edge, the new version of Microsoft Edge, has been released for Windows and Mac. And there are a ton of interesting articles that have come after that, including one gentleman who downloaded on his Mac and said that he is surprised how great it is. And then some other folks are looking at the bigger picture of browsers, that this probably means that in the end, and there's been rumors that Safari might become Chrome-based at some point, but allow the open source project that Google manages to create the de facto standard for web browsers, because they release that to the public for free, including other companies want to build on top of it. And then the differential becomes what those browsers can do for you in terms of extra services. And although I don't think Microsoft has a corner on privacy, right? They own advertising companies. They utilize tracking technologies. I'm not sure if you can say that they are remarkably better at this than our friends at the Google about this. But I would say that from all the media I'm reading, that the Edge browser, which is now installed on my Windows box at work, and I haven't put it on, I just have older Macs around now, and I haven't put it on there yet, although I hear it's nice and crisp. But one of the features they're touting is privacy features, and that becomes an interesting differential. And certainly if I were an IT director, I would immediately install or force install the new version of Edge, because it is so much better and so much more secure than Internet Explorer, which kind of exists in some way, shape, or form in newer versions of Windows 10. And it also does fit really well in the Microsoft universe. So Edge, so far, I hear a lot of great things about.
Maybe we can do some quick headlines here, and then we're going to be at the top of the hour already. This is a fast one. Air Force Magazine, January 24th. Space Force, we have a seal. And yes, it looks just like Star Trek, although the article says that the U.S. Space Command, part of the Air Force, has used this triangular logo, and there's been other places that are using it. So it does seem a bit surreal that we have a Space Force that is official as part of our military today. I want to also do a shout out to a great group of links that we'll include in the show notes from Peggy George. And this is actually from Youth Voices, Paul Allison webinar that she saw and participated in recently called Youth Voices in Election 2020. The web links, there's one from KQED about election 2020, the Future Voters Project that's on tolerance.org, and then Letters to the Next President, which has the number 2, but it's letters, the number 2, president.org. Just, some great resources. And I'll say this, even though we live in a highly polarized environment, right? There's like some kind of trial, I think, going on maybe in Washington right now, something I've heard about. We need to be talking with students about this and talking about the importance of listening to each other. And even though, we have a lot of different opinions about these kinds of things, like citizenship and civic education is so important. And there's really important overlays between, technology and civic education as well. Some articles you want to do some quick headlines for, Jason?
Sure. Lifehacker reports on January 15th that Paris Museums, which is a kind of a loose organization of the many wonderful art institutions in Paris, has released a large collection of 150,000 images of artwork into the public domain. So you can just go to the website, you can search in their database and get high-resolution images of a ton of historical art. So if you are in a history, humanities, art, English language arts classroom, free to use for you, and a great contribution to open culture.
Another pretty interesting article I read in the last 2 weeks, since we haven't had a show, was from the New York Times on January 17th, and it's called "This is the Guy Who's Taking Away the Likes." And so this is something that Instagram has been rolling out, and the person they're talking about is named Adam Mosseri. He actually came from Facebook and is a good buddy of Mark Zuckerberg. But part of what they're trying to do, and we've talked about this on the show with wellness, is they're recognizing the incredible power psychologically that social media and likes have, and recognizing that in order to, I guess, address concerns that are very valid about how, their platform and tools and their whole interface is really designed kind of like a slot machine to be able to give, endorphin, am I saying that right? Boosting chemicals, anyway, good brain chemicals in your brain to be released anyway, that maybe they need to, dial this back a little bit. And so this is a very interesting article about that and how they are, responding, and just, a little bit of insight into the thinking of some upper level leaders at Instagram as well as Facebook. So as it says, the delicate balance, keeping both Facebook and Instagram happy, facing animosity in both camps, is a real challenge to try to balance those kinds of things. I'll say that, today living in the tech correction, as we've talked about, if this was when Facebook was proposing the purchase of Instagram, I wonder if they would be able to pull that off. But they probably would. I mean, we really haven't had any kind of sea change in terms of corporate consolidation and things like that. But, there's certainly dangers when competition gets absorbed, and, these companies have network effects that they get bigger and bigger. And so what alternatives? What's the name of I joined it. You told me about it and I downloaded it. It's this alternative.
Yeah, and of course I remembered so much that I
MeWe. Yeah,
yep.
I've got the app. Yeah, I haven't logged in since I joined 2 weeks ago, but maybe I'll log in again tonight and post something for the 3 people that are on there that might see it. Yeah, it's hard to shift. All right, well, shall we Geek of the Week it?
Sure, let's do it. I'll do a quick one. So I thought I mentioned this before. I didn't find anything in the show notes. Pebble was a company that started off on Kickstarter to create an e-ink watch, and the early versions were pretty clunky. But I have like smartwatches, and my primary use for a smartwatch, although I do like the fitness component to it, is that I like to have it for blood sugar control. And so I have what's called a constant glucose monitor made by a company called Dexcom, and I like to be able to not have to look at my phone to check my blood sugar. And so Pebble was a company that made e-ink smartwatches. They were purchased by Fitbit, I think, in 2016. Fitbit promptly shut down the making of Pebble watches. They took a lot of the technology and involved in other watches. But the Pebble community survived, and the newer versions of the watches, and by newer I mean the ones they released before they were shut down, have long battery life, 4 to 5 days of battery life. They have apps on them, and they are a good quality product. The problem, of course, was they shut down the servers, so you couldn't do anything anymore with it, like install apps or even do much beyond basic watch functionality. Well, as it turns out, the internet is full of crafty people, and a group started a site called Rebel, spelt like Pebble with an R, so referring to the Rebel Alliance, if you will. And Rebel allows you to take old Pebble watches and use them on modern Android and iOS devices. And so I purchased this on eBay a couple of weeks ago for like $22. And these originally went for nearly $200. And it is an e-ink watch. So it has a display that doesn't suck down battery. But the most important thing for me here is that my blood sugar is dealing with its post-dinner high right now, but it has my blood sugar on it. So I can always see that information. And I was able to install new apps on it. Then it works. So far, it's used about 40% of the battery in 72 hours. And so I'm really excited about this prospect. And it's kind of a nerdy tool, right? Like that it's not as flashy as more modern day watches, but some of the recent releases from Pebble before they were shut down, I think is a very attractive watch. Not as clunky looking, I think, as some other modern smartwatches. And it's a nice project. I was able to go from not functional to functional in about 20 minutes, and then it's a pleasure to wear on my arm. So the Project Rebel re-engaging Pebble watches.
There you go. And mine is a Today Explained podcast from January 24th. I referenced the Amazon Jeff Bezos Saudi Arabia situation. And here's where I learned about this. The episode is called The Crown Prince and the Amazon King. And so I really think from a media literacy standpoint, it is hugely important for us to talk about how do we try and wade into and discern, what to believe and what to discard and what is, conspiracy and what is outlandish and then what is, valid, et cetera. So this is a pretty interesting dive into the world of, as Jason said, intelligence, operations, the ways in which phones and, mobile technology plays into that, how important links are that you click. And the link that I gave to that was actually from Pocket Casts, which remains my favorite podcasting app to listen to. And shout out to Pocket Cast as well. So there we go. I'm afraid another show is in the can. What are you doing, Jason, when you're not here?
Well, a couple of shout outs. I'm going to be at the Idaho Educational Technology Association conference next week in Boise, Idaho. I'm presenting 3 times on Tuesday, once with my partner in crime of presentations, Mike Agustinelli from the Digital Academy. It's not too late if you're in the Boise area to jump in that conference.
What kind of sessions will you be doing?
I'll be doing one session on digital distraction, one session on the 6 mobile apps every tech-savvy teacher should have on their phone, and then one session, the 5 things every administrator needs to know about their personal technology. I also just found out that I will be presenting at DLAC, the Digital Learning Annual Conference in Austin at the end of February. I was waitlisted for my presentation, but was recently promoted to a regular session, so I'm really excited about that. I'm presenting on reading there. And the week after that is NCC Seattle 2020 in lovely Seattle, Washington, where I have, I think, 7 or 8 presentations I'm doing over 3 days. And so busy times, but please come see me. Introduce yourself if you're a EdTech Situation Room listener. I'd love to connect with folks at any of these variety of events. Awesome. You can find me on Twitter at TechSavvyTeach or the NCC blog.ncc.org.
Fantastic. Have you ever audio recorded some of your sessions and, put those up?
I have never put them up. I have audio recorded before, but then I get embarrassed at the ums.
You know what? Just put it up. It's good. I recommend you set up an Anchor channel and throw recordings up there. I will listen, and I promise to not judge, only love. So there you go. Great. On Twitter, my blog is speedofcreativity.org, and my curriculum for middle division lessons for middle schoolers, media literacy, and digital literacy is mdtech.cassidy.org. The final question from the chat you must respond because we can't let her down. Peggy's given us a question. What are the 6 mobile apps every teacher should have, Jason? Or maybe she should tune into your Anchor channel in a couple of weeks.
They're categories of apps, but let me see if I can remember these. It's the presentation's in process. I can tell you the probably most surprising app on there I'll talk about in a future episode.
There you go. You're going to get the full episode. Folks, you're just going to have to come back. Do you want to close this out? We just end with that.
Well, this here is not me being cagey about the 6 apps every teacher should have on their phone, but rather it's the EdTech Situation Room. We are once a week podcast that records on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 3 a.m.-ish UTC. You can always find us on your favorite podcast app. You can also find us on a Stitcher Radio is another location where you can find us. You can go to YouTube and find the video episodes there, or you can go to our website, edtechsr.com. You can download show notes, you can download all the links we talk about on the show, plus others that we don't have the chance to get to, and you can download teeny tiny MP3s if that's your preference on the phone. Until next time, we encourage you to stay safe and stay savvy, and we hope to see you next time on the EdTech Situation Room. Good night.